Hello, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy evening to join us for our final National President Town Hall meeting for this mandate. I want to begin by recognizing that while USJE is convening this town hall virtually, we are meeting on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people for thousands of years. I am joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, the territory where USJE's national office is located. Before we start, I want to thank all of you for the crucial work that you do every day to keep Canadians safe. These last few years have been extremely challenging, whether it was the global pandemic, economic disruptions, high inflation, or more recently, PSAC's national general strike. But you, our members, have continued to show incredible resiliency and remain extremely dedicated to the safety of all Canadians. You have also taken a stand on improving working conditions for you and your coworkers. Thank you. Les années qui viennent de s'écouler ont contenu leurs défis. Nous avons traversé une pandémie, une forte inflation et récemment une grève nationale. Mais vous, les membres, vous avez continué de démontrer une dévotion incroyable en assurant la sécurité pour tous les gens du Canada et un engagement pour des environnements et des conditions de travail meilleures pour vos collègues et pour vous-même. Merci. This evening's town hall has been scheduled for quite some time and comes on the heels of a significant 12-day labor action. With this in mind, this evening's town hall will be focused on the PSAC National General Strike, as I know that's an important topic for most of us here this evening. More specifically, I'll be covering the following topics. 1, the distinctive roles between USJE and PSAC in the collective bargaining process. 2, the possible sources of income during a strike. Thirdly, our union's financial situation following the strike. I'll also touch on USJE's special top-up and also discuss some next steps. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the 2 USJE members who recently sat on PSAC's bargaining teams and who are here joining us this evening. We've got J.R. Legault, a PA bargaining team member and a member from Hamilton, Ontario. And we also have Satinder Baines, a SV bargaining team member and a member from Regina, Saskatchewan. I will be asking each of them to speak a little later this evening so they can provide some additional information on the new tentative agreement. Maintenant, parlons de la grève. Now about the strike. I want to begin by bringing clarity on the roles of USJE and PSAC respectively in regards to the recent strike or any future strike for that matter. PSAC is comprised of 15 separate components, USJE being just one of them. While each component has its own governance structure, PSAC is legally mandated to be the bargaining agent with the Treasury Board on behalf of these 15 components. This means that the PSAC is authorized to bargain on behalf of all members, including the approximately 18,000 members that are part of USJE. PSAC is therefore responsible for leading negotiations on all collective agreements. To do this, PSAC establishes well in advance a variety of bargaining committees comprised of representatives from components. These committees determine the various bargaining demands and actively negotiate at the bargaining table. In the event of a strike, PSAC also oversees and manages the day-to-day realities of any strike that occurs. This includes the actual strike vote, the decision and distribution of strike pay, the location and management of picket lines, as well as a ratification vote on an agreement will be conducted. USJE's role during a strike is to assist and support its members, locals and regional vice presidents with communications and general information sharing and troubleshooting. USJE's finance and administration team steps in to assist our locals who require assistance in establishing locally funded top-up pay, providing financial guidance, as well as answering calls and emails of our members. I am sure some of you on this call were in regular contact with the national office regarding some of these matters. During the strike, USJE's labor relations and information management teams were also very busy answering members' questions and concerns, dealing with issues around essential service agreements, and providing support to USJE's picket captains and many members on the line. In addition, USJE staff worked countless hours processing new USJE membership cards as quickly as possible. Lastly, USJE's communications team dedicated themselves to sending daily comprehensive updates via email to our members with timely information and strike developments. These daily updates were sent to all members on USJE's lists, and they highlighted many of the strike actions undertaken by USJE's members. These updates also responded to the questions that USJE was getting via email and social media. I'm very proud and thankful that we have such dedicated staff who went way above and beyond when our members needed it the most. I thank you all. But I'm also very aware that there are areas where USJE can improve, considering that we don't go through a strike very often. The last strike was almost 19 years ago. With this in mind, USJE has created a short survey for our members to complete, which will allow us to better understand their experience during the recent strike and where we can do better. The survey is now available on our website and was included in our newsletter sent last week. The closing date for the survey will be May 28th. Rest assured that the survey findings will be shared with PSAC once they have been collated, analyzed, and assessed. Vos commentaires seront très utiles pour déterminer ce que nous avons fait de bien et comment nous pouvons nous améliorer. This historic strike was one of the largest in Canadian history. It sought to secure fair wages and better working conditions for more than 120,000 PSAC members. The new agreement, if ratified, will help to set the bar for many employers in Canada. The National General Strike is the first of its kind since 1991. The strike was not only about PSAC members, but for all workers in Canada, private, public, unionized, and non-unionized. The strike showed us that when workers stick together, we can make real gains. And none of this would have been possible without your sacrifice and solidarity, as well as the hard work and dedication of our bargaining teams who worked 24/7 to reach a deal. Together, we intensified the pressure on the federal government to reach a tentative agreement. After nearly 2 years of protracted negotiations where little was accomplished, and the Treasury Board often didn't even have the courtesy to show up at the bargaining table, time and time again. I have been asked numerous times now if USJE has taken a position on accepting or rejecting the tentative agreement. My answer is this: we don't tell our members how to vote. We will provide the information and urge them to vote, but ultimately it's their decision and we must respect it. I will highlight that all of the PSAC bargaining teams are recommending the adoption of the agreement. I want to share with you that this is only my third strike in 22 years in the federal public service. My first strike was in 2001 and lasted literally 1 day. It started and ended on September the 11th. The second strike was in 2004. It was called a strategic strike, which only lasted a few days. I'll be honest, going into the strike, I expected things to be quite different. Who could have predicted what a national general strike would have looked like in the year 2023? No one really knew if the government would come to the bargaining table and truly negotiate in good faith. Most of us thought, if anything, the strike would be a short and pointed affair. What we saw, unfortunately, is that the Treasury Board repeatedly stalled at the bargaining table and claiming that they were prepared to negotiate when, in fact, their actions spoke otherwise. We were up against the reality that the Treasury Board was not motivated to meet our members in the middle, nor were they able to acknowledge the true value of the work all of our members do on behalf of Canadians. The economic increases offered were below our expectations, and as PSAC worked hard to get a deal that would keep up with inflationary pressures. In the end, I'm convinced that our bargaining team secured the best possible deal. They fought valiantly on our behalf and sought to ensure that improvements were made to our members' working conditions. I am proud of our bargaining team and for their tireless work at the bargaining table. Make no mistake, the decision to reach a tentative agreement on day 12 of the strike was a tough one, especially with the pressures our frontline members were facing on the strike line. Many members shared how much they rely on their regular pay during these very high inflationary times and could not meet their financial obligations without this pay. At the same time, our members demanded a fair deal, and I believe our bargaining teams brought back what they understood as the best deal. With this in mind, I would like to bring some clarity on the possible sources of income our members could have access to if deemed non-essential and were on the strike line. It is important to identify that the PSAC is the strike administrator of the main $75 per day strike pay for those who were deemed non-essential and walking the strike line. Secondly, some USJE locals, approximately 39 of them, have established local strike funds that have been built up over time through the collection of local dues. These locals will make available a strike top-up to their eligible members. The amounts will be varying depending on what is contained in the local's bylaws and the amount that has been collected. Now, some USJE locals have also made decisions to offer their own top-up out of their general revenues or other strategic funds. These funds are being voted on through USJE locals' special general meetings and determined through the membership. Please consult with your local to see if they are providing a local top-up. And lastly, the USJE National Executive recently adopted a one-time national strike top-up of $50 per day for those who were on the strike line. This top-up was established to capture any strike days starting April 26th up to a maximum payout of $2 million. This money was taken out of our unrestricted reserves. So to summarize, as a member on strike, PSAC strike pay is the main source of income. It is possible that your USJE local also approved additional strike top-up pay. Plus, there is a one-time USJE national top-up that USJE's national executive approved. Now, PSAC also has a hardship fund, which is available during strikes, but these funds are not intended to be a supplement to a strike pay. They are very rigid guidelines to apply and qualify, and you must go through the PSAC Regional Executive Vice President in your region. Of course, USJE recognized that many of our own members were struggling financially and would benefit from more support while on strike. USJE was committed during the strike to do everything we could within reason, given USJE's financial realities. I would now like to share a snapshot of USJE's finances with you and to help you understand why the National Executive chose to provide a $50 top-up amount to a maximum of $2 million out of unrestricted reserves for those USJE members on the strike line from April 26 moving forward. For this information, I'll ask our Director of Finance and Administration, Christina Hatchard, to provide the snapshot. Christina?
Good evening, all. So in taking a look at what funds might be available for strike top-up, our national executive had a meeting and looked at this information. We looked at the unrestricted funds that we had at USJE at year end, which were around $7 million. We then took a look at the current approved funds that were to be spent from that at about $2.6 million, leaving $4.3 million left that had not been allotted to any funds. We took about half of that in the strike fund training, given that we had around 8,325 members who we thought may potentially be essential, creating a strike fund of $2 million. The remaining amount of $2.3 million that we left in the unrestricted funds was to go towards the resolutions for convention that had already been approved. Now, taking that into account, obviously it was a very difficult decision And the funds were allotted to start on the 26th and go until the fund was no more. As we know, the dates that will be covered by this fund will be the 26th, 27th, and 28th, as we were then had a collective agreement that was signed off on the Sunday night before striking Monday. David?
Thank you, Christina. So now David will be able to resume and talk about the possible outcomes and the upcoming ratification votes. So David, are you ready to talk about the ratification votes?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So lastly, let's discuss the possible outcomes of the ratification vote process before I ask our bargaining team members to share their thoughts. Now that the bargaining teams have reached a tentative agreement, it's up to the members to decide if they want to ratify the agreement or to reject it. Members must take part in a PSAC information session in order to become eligible to vote on the tentative agreement. If the agreement is ratified by a majority of the members, which means 50% plus one, then the parties will ratify the agreement. And once the agreements have been signed, the employer will have 180 days to implement the new agreements. If a majority of the members vote to reject the offer, then the bargaining team members must go back to the bargaining table and the negotiations continue. That also means that if talks break down, we may also return to the picket lines. At this point, I'd like to welcome the USJE members who have served on the SB and PA bargaining teams, Satinder Bains and J.R. Legault. Now, what I would like for each one of them to share with you are the following. Why do you recommend acceptance of this agreement? And also, please feel free to share any other thoughts you have about the current tentative agreement and what your experience was like negotiating with the Treasury Board. So I'm going to turn it over to Satinder Bains. And Satinder, thank you for being here this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you for having me here. First, I want to say it was an honor to serve you all to be on your SV bargaining team. My name is Satinder Bains. I'm the president from Local 40002 in Regina, Saskatchewan as the RCMP depot. And I'm also a proud member of your USJE Equity Committee. I want to talk a little bit about my SV team. We had a very professional, experienced, knowledgeable team members on our bargaining team. We represented 10,237 members from across Canada, representing all classifications equally. We worked well together as colleagues. We were well prepared to negotiate for our members so they could get the best deal possible. But bargaining for more than 2 years was not easy with our employer. They hardly met with us. They made us wait in a room where they would come to a meeting, leave, and then we would wait for them, and they wouldn't show up until the next day. They had no clue what we do at our job sites or how hard our members work. Yet they dictate to us what we should be paid. I really felt like a third-class citizen. It was almost demeaning. What we were proposing were 4.5, 4.5, and 4.5 over 3 years. And what they were offering was 2.06 over 4 years. Yet the Public Interest Commission was recommending 1.5, 4.5, and 3, roughly 9%, and which was non-binding. And with the wage adjustment for the firefighters was 20%, for the GL group was 14.8, for the GS was 12.2, for the HPs was 13.5, and the ship crew was 27.5. That's how far we're underpaid compared to outside the public service. But the last 21 days of negotiation was very stressful. the employer again would not show up. They didn't even want to meet with us. We were on 24-hour standby waiting for them, and they would meet us for 10 minutes and leave, and they would be gone home. But in the second week of the strike, we started to make some progress. But at the same time, my picket captain, my strike captain, they were calling me, texting me, what's going on? We got members who are very upset. They want to cross the picket line. They had enough. The media was really against us. They were saying that we weren't negotiating, we weren't coming to the table, yet it was the employer who was not coming to the table. Yet we could not communicate with our members to let us know what was really happening. But eventually, because of the strike, we did come up to economic increase. And I'll just give a little highlight of what we got from August 2021. Total economic increase was 1.5. August 2022 was 4.75. And August 2023 was 3.5%, which is minimum with the wage adjustment. Somebody got 0.5, but that's all we could get out of them. It was 0 or 0.5. We had no choice. We were bargaining with a very tough employer. And then in 2024 August, we got 2.25. So that's the kind of a compliment we had. Somebody who was really hard to deal with. Now I feel we got the best deal we could get. I also feel the members should have a chance to vote on the gains we made during the 10 days of the strike. But outside of this, the SV team also secured a promise from our national president to take the SV group to a binding arbitration next round. Now, binding arbitration is when a third party makes the decision on items in dispute. The SV group wages have been really low comparatively to workers doing the same work outside the public service. An arbitrator has the power to decide what our wages will be. The next SV team negotiator and the research officer will provide wage research supporting our demands for comparative salaries. And for those reasons, myself, and I'm pretty sure my whole SV team are recommending this tentative agreement. And again, I want to thank you all for really supporting us, for being on the bargaining team. Thank you so much.
Okay, and JR? There he is.
Good evening, everybody. My name is JR Legault. I'm part of the PA bargaining team. I'm the local president for local 00079, CSC Community Toronto. I guess to Tinder answer a few questions people might have asked, but I'm going to start with David's question about what it was like being on the bargaining team. So for the PA team, there were 8 of us at the end that represent just under 100,000 members. So you can imagine the vast diversity of different jobs and groups and classifications within that. So which made it difficult. We started and people want to know where all the demands go and that kind of stuff. So, you know, when we started, we were at over 700 demands at the convention, at the bargaining conference a couple of years ago. And that gets whittled down at the conference and so on and so forth, where we have the priorities when we get there. So as far as USJE specific demands, many of them were on the table for a long period of time, as long as possible. I can tell you that. It was a very frustrating process. I went to and the PA team went to Ottawa this last round on, I actually traveled on Easter Monday to get there to have a caucus on Easter Monday to start our next round of mediation with the employer on Tuesday. I can tell you that from then until when we got a tentative agreement, I did not see the employer once. We sat in a room waiting for them. We never saw their negotiator come into our room. It was all outside. We had times when we would wait around until as Satinder mentioned, we'd be on call 24/7, but you'd be on standby till, 9, 10 o'clock at night waiting because you might get a pass from them, but you wouldn't get one. The PA team really didn't get passes often. It was very frustrating. Whether you heard differently in the media, and we were on a blackout, but whether heard different in the media, with Madame Forche, Mona Forche, saying that they're at the table waiting for this and good offers, they were not there. I can promise you that those offers were not on the table at that period of time. The only things that got us motivated towards moving closer was us going on strike. And it didn't motivate as much as everyone would hope, but it definitely helped motivate it. And up to that point, even though you might said, oh, we offered them the pick, which was the 9% approximately, the offer was still the 2.06 per year over 4 years. And then it went down to 3 years, which was less, which is about 8%. So the strike had to moving us closer to what we needed to do. We moved to a 4-year to make that number bigger. The strike helped us get certain language we needed in the PA collective agreement, also moved towards some type of allowances. Now you'll see that some allowance, like specifically, let's talk about the public safety allowance we discussed for members that are within USJE. It stayed on there for a long time, but the language within the demand made it very difficult to the end where we would have missed so many people that it wouldn't have really worked out, and the employer wasn't interested. As you can notice too, it wasn't the only one. They also didn't add any other allowances. They didn't add the Veterans Affairs allowance, and they also didn't allow the Indigenous languages allowance, which is quite shameful, to be honest. So all that stuff was put on to the very end, and we had to come to a decision at the end as a team what would be the best. And we feel as a team that we squeezed out as much as we could, and this was the best offer on there. I saw a question on there to answer about things in the media. Well, the Treasury Board, Mona Forche, talking about how they're there and we're not meeting with them was all false. We were there. They weren't meeting with us. We weren't getting any passes back. They weren't giving us anything good and substantive. We would give them something and then we'd wait days, and we decided not to give them anything else until they responded, which would be reasonable in negotiations. And their bargaining is not bargaining or negotiations. It's not always about money. It's power and control, which leads to some of the things that we got, such as the parole officer workload being a letter of agreement rather than an MOU or how it started. That's a power and control thing. Now, because it was bargained at that table, even though it's not in the collective agreement, it still is part of the bargaining process. And so if we follow that, and it's a stepping stone, so it's a move in the right direction. It's not what we wanted, but it's a move in the right direction that we can file unfair labor practices towards that. I also want to bring up the fact that some of the questions that we had social media and some members might be speaking positive or negative, whatever it might be. I just want to bring up the fact that anything that people write on there, we always want to look strong together. We want to look strong and makes the team stronger. And we appreciate all the support for everyone going up to strike and everyone doing what they had to do to get us this best agreement that we possibly get. So to follow up the second question, yes, as a team, we support this and we ask people to vote yes. Even though you see a vote no campaign, I would like you to take perspective in the fact that what would we get if we went back out? What would you think would be the thing? Because if you think 0.5% or 1%, which I don't think is there, was something that will be what people want to do, how much are you going to lose between now and then to make up that 0.5% if we possibly get it? And I don't think it's there. I'm just mentioning it because I do see the vote no campaign, and it's unfortunate, but we're looking for everyone's support because we recommend this as a yes. We believe it's the best agreement because also we have no concessions. There were concessions on the table until 15 minutes before we got a tentative agreement. I can tell you that they wanted certain stuff and they were still trying to make people like IS workers, shift workers, and they also wanted to still make people give the ability to have split shifts. But what that means is that we felt that they were going to try to make people do split shifts by trying to sweeten the pot however they could. So we didn't feel like any of this stuff was good for our members. So I can tell you that yes, we got as much as we could out of it. We also have 0 concessions. So on the backs of that, we look for to support everyone to vote yes for this contract. Thanks.
Thank you, JR. And thank you, Satinder, as well, for the information you have shared with us this evening. And please stay tuned as we may call on you to assist with a few questions we may receive later this evening. Je serai heureux de répondre à vos questions et j'apprécie toujours les commentaires de nos membres. À toi, Sébastien.
Thank you, David. To be a fly in the wall on the wall in that that meeting where the bargaining teams meet would be so interesting. Thank you for being with us here, Satinder and JR. I'm sure our members appreciate it. We've received a lot of questions. Thank you, everyone who sent the questions. Feel free to send in some more. I'll begin, David. I'll begin with a few questions for you, and then we'll be going to Christina for a few as well. Question number one, David, and this has been brought up a few times by a few members. Why is USJE only providing the top up from the 26th to the 29th instead of the duration of the complete strike?
So that particular motion that was passed by the National Executive was passed on the Tuesday evening. That was the 25th. And during the discussion and debate of the National Executive, it was determined that it would be wise to do it starting the next day moving forward. We tried to implement it very quickly after the motion. And again, keeping in mind that this would be announced as a top-up and making sure that members were going to be aware that they were going to be eligible for it if they were on the strike line. The other thing here too is with the $2 million that we took out of the unrestricted reserves, it was unclear really as to in terms of how much it would actually cover. I believe that as we had figured out the numbers based on the number of people we were projecting on the line, we were trying to determine whether it was 3 or 4 days total. And again, without exactly knowing how many we would have to pay out, it was difficult to make that determination. So as it relates to the top up, as far as we know at this point, it will cover the last 3 days of the strike. And again, keeping in mind that we're waiting to see if this tentative agreement is ratified. If it is not ratified, those funds, if there are any remaining, would need to be applied if we had to go back to the strike line. Again, I can't make any promises on how much may be left. We know that there's been a lot of issues with the PSAC in terms of identifying pay for those on the strike line. There's been a lot of manual entries into the system. So we're still sitting here waiting to try to make sure that we get everybody paid as far as we know that they've been on the strike line.
Thank you, David. Keeping in line with, possible sources of income you can get if you're on the picket line, why is the PSAC strike pay set at $75 per day?
So the $75 per day is actually in the Constitution, and it's set by the PSAC. That's set by the Triennial Convention. At our USJE Triennial Convention in Whistler here in July, there is a resolution that is actually coming forward to look to be sent to the PSAC to increase the amount. If my memory serves me correct, I think it was about $125 or $130 to $125 or $130 per day. Again, it's the PSAC convention that would make that determination. The $75 has been in place for quite a few years. I don't remember exactly the year that that was established, but it has been like that for quite some time.
Thank you, David. So when can members expect to vote on the proposed offer?
So what I was told last week is that they wanted to give approximately a week's notice to our members before the ratification votes were to begin. The ratification kits were released, I believe it was on Saturday. So I would anticipate that the ratification votes should be starting very soon. I know the goal is to have all the ratification votes done by the middle of June.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is going to go to Christina. We'll talk a bit, if you have this information, Christina. I know David touched a bit about it. So for the USJE national top-up, that's going to occur for the 26th and 27th and 28th. Any estimate as to when we can anticipate to process those payments?
Yes, so we're hoping, David alluded to the sheer volume of information that PSAC had to enter. So we're finally feeling as though we have some fulsome lists, maybe not fully complete, that we would like to start dispersing those monies near the end of this week and into next week.
Thank you, Christina. And of course, as soon as as Christina's team is ready to begin processing those payments, you can be assured that the communications team, my team, will be sending communications to that effect to our members, so you're aware that it's happening. Bon, on va parler de la langue de Molière. Question numéro 7. Rebecca ou David, ça reste à vous. Bonsoir. Si une entente est rejetée, est-ce un retour à la grève automatique dès le premier jour ou est-ce qu'on retourne à la table des négociations? Alors, Rebecca, David, alors si l'entente est rejetée, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Le lendemain, est-ce qu'on s'en va sur faire la grève sur les piquets de grève ou est-ce que l'équipe de négo retourne à la table de négociation?
Merci Seb. C'est la dernière. Si l'entente est rejetée, on retourne à la table, mais s'il n'y a pas de progrès, il y a une forte probabilité que nous serons encore à la ligne. Il y a aussi le risque que l'employeur peut reculer avec leur offre si on doit retourner à la table. Des concessions pourraient être retournées, leur offre peut changer. Mais on ne va pas retourner immédiatement à la ligne de piquetage. On va essayer au moins de négocier.
D'accord. Rebecca, reste là, j'ai une autre question pour toi. J'aimerais comprendre la portion des horaires variables. Est-ce que la possibilité d'avoir un congé horaire aux 14 jours ou 21 jours est toujours disponible ou c'est seulement un jour sur période de 28 jours?
Alors, le nouveau langage, ce que ça change, c'est seulement la période auquel on calcule les heures moyennes. Alors, c'est encore possible d'avoir une journée de congé à la 14 jours, à la 21 jours, le 28 jours, même au 7 si tu peux travailler comme quelqu'un. Des périodes de 10 heures, ça va. Ce que c'est seulement au cours du 28 jours que la moyenne des heures doit être le 37,5 par semaine.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Rebecca. The next question, we'll go back to Satinder and JR. A question here about vacation. So Satinder and JR, why were, if you can answer this question, if not, just let us know, we'll try to find out the information. Why were vacation days taken off the common issue table? And why is the union agreeing to take this off the table going forward? Do you know any of that about the vacation days in the commons issue table?
I guess I'll speak to it. Yeah, it was done in the common issues table. I don't know the actual answer, but it was part of my understanding is that they weren't interested in the vacation days. And I don't know when it left the table. As far as moving forward, never bring it up again. I haven't heard that, but I do know that, yeah, it was taken off this one. I don't know why. And I'm going for common issues this year, so I don't think that question.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now I see some people are typing. So Satinder, do you want to add something?
Yes, the vacation, the way I understand was the vacation days were at common issues. And my recollection is the issue that are at the common issues are decided by the PSAC and the TBS before each round. And vacation are pretty much always been common issues. That's the only thing I can add on to what JR said. Thank you.
Thank you, Satinder. Christina, I've got a question for you. So this member, I was missing off the list that went to USJE. Will I still get the $50 for the days approved? I got full payment from PSEC for all 8 days of picketing. So what should this member do in this instance, Christina? Oh, you're muted there, dear.
Sorry, they should not be, the information that we use to calculate the strike top up it comes from the PSAC data. So that's again why I'm saying that with all the manual entries and everything, USJE is taking its time to make sure we have the most fulsome data. And definitely at the end, when we are given a sort of okay from PSAC that they're done all manual entries, we'll make a second swoop of the system and the list to make sure that we didn't forget anyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Let's go back to David. David, there's confusion if we are getting retro pay. I know you've gotten that question a few times too. So can you confirm, are our members getting retro pay?
So I can say that from the conversations I've had, there's no indication to say that we would not get retro pay going back to 2021. JR, I know that I had a conversation with you about that today a little bit. Can you maybe just confirm my understanding that the retro pay will go back to 2021?
Yeah, David, my understanding is that retro pay will go back to 2021, but allowances are only from date of signing. So whenever we ratify this agreement, signing the collective agreement, and our third year starts this June.
Okay, I do have a few questions here about telework. I'm not sure if it's going to be bargaining team members or David. Why did we sacrifice the work from home language in the new collective agreement? By missing this opportunity, we've lost the opportunity, at least until the next pandemic, to build upon this future. So the work from home language in the collective agreement, can we talk about that a little bit? Because it's not in the collective agreement?
Maybe I'll start a bit, and then JR, I'll go over to you because I know the telework work that you did on the PA bargaining table was very important. So in terms of telework, we know that as a component of the PSAC, we have been very strong on the point of ensuring that telework is flexible, creative, and that it is not to be a one size fits all. We have been demanding a nuanced approach. And I will say that the letter of agreement that was reached as part of this tentative agreement, in fact, does agree to take a nuanced approach and to ensure that it's a case-by-case basis, because we know the one size fit all was not going to work. In terms of the actual not fitting it into the collective agreement, I've discussed it with a number of people, even in the PSAC, the National Executive Vice President as well. And I think, and I'll let JR speak to this more, the concern here was that the Treasury Board was not willing to enshrine it into the collective agreement. They were not interested in it. In the media, they were very vocal about the fact that this was a management right, not an employee right. It's a privilege. There was many different words that they had used. And I think the bargaining team did take the strongest position that we could on the issue of telework, trying to ensure that there was a fair process, that there was a way to have it seen and overseen at a higher level. And so I think that without trying to jump into JR's response here, I think that the honest feeling here was it was important to ensure that we were building a foundational block for the future, if anything, to make sure that there was things that could continue to be built upon. You got to remember that there's a few components that had their telework extended 1 year. The Canada Revenue Agency, and I believe also, I think it was Service Canada, and JR, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think honestly, this was such a hot button topic. I don't know if Treasury Board knew what to do with it. And the fact that we were fighting to the end to ensure that we had something reasonable to bring back to our members on this was very important. And all I can say is that we will continue to work with the departments to ensure that they take a creative and flexible approach. and that, that they make sure that is made available to our members. JR, I'll turn it over to you for any other further insight on the negotiations around that.
Thanks, David. So again, this was a common issues table, but it was brought to PA multiple times to discuss. And like I mentioned earlier when I was speaking, that it's a power and control thing. Just because it's not in the collective agreement, it's a letter of agreement like the PO workload. And what it's already done that I've seen working for CSC is that they had that 3 days mandatory, and now I see that they're already starting to back off on that because it will be individuals. It's supposed to be based on individual people. So I saw that question in one of the chats as well, that it will be based on individual by basis. What didn't get in the agreement, they don't want in there, they don't want it enshrined in there, but there is a letter of agreement. And also the fact that we want to talk more about this vote no campaign is because many members that aren't our component think that working from home 5 days a week is what they're there. I don't think that will ever be put in our collective agreement. So that's another thing to look out for. So yes, it is going to be, again, unfair labor practice if they don't follow this procedure.
Thank you, JR and David. And we are receiving quite a few comments about staff responding to emails very quickly. Thank you, Tony. I see you sent a comment. I'll make sure to pass on that to the staff. They'll appreciate reading that information, that feedback. David, 2 back-to-back questions for you. One about the ratification vote process again. There seems to be a lot of questions about the deal that members have and need answers before they can vote. Will there be clarifications to the tentative deal? Members would like to see pay scales for their group, understand the wage increases as they're not straightforward, ensure that we are entitled to back pay, etc. Will there be clarification? So basically, can you summarize what's the next steps for ratifications for more information?
Sure, I'll try to answer the question to the best of my ability, and then I'll ask Rebecca to fill in any blanks that I may have missed. So my understanding is that the ratification votes should be occurring very soon, with the intent of having them complete by the middle of June. The ratification votes will have information provided prior to them voting, and my understanding is that questions can also be asked as part of those ratification votes. And again, I really want to make sure that we encourage all of our members to vote. Whether you're in agreement or not in agreement, it's very important that you let your voice be heard on whether this tentative agreement works for you. And again, it's similar to prior to even going to the bargaining table, when we've had many other meetings with bargaining team members as well, and talking about bargaining. It's important to be able to get the information you need to really understand what's at stake. And Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if there's anything more you can add.
Thanks, Dave. We will certainly flag for PSAC that our members are bringing questions to us about certain things, and we would like some clarification. We will be working on that. The ratification meetings, the information meetings you make before voting are also a very good opportunity to ask a lot of these questions. But I will be reaching out to the head of the negotiations branch to ensure that things like the salary grids are ready to go, because I get those. Yeah, I get those as being an important part, because I'm not a math person either. I have Christina for that. Math makes my head hurt. So
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Rebecca. David, about the PO workload working group. So I guess there was an agreement to strike a PO workload working group, and Alex believes that there have been various working groups in the past, but they generally appear to have limited effect on the front line, as the employer still tends to do what they want. Will this one be more of the same, or does the fact that it is tied to bargaining gives additional avenues to hold the employer accountable?
So this particular bargaining demand, which came through USJE, was very specific in terms of workload. And JR will be able to speak a little bit more to that as well after myself. It actually detailed exactly what we were looking for in a workload. And I will say very clearly that Correctional Service of Canada was not really willing to enter into any agreement on workload based on what we had recommended. Those recommendations that we had taken from the parole officer group back in June of 2021 were used to help create the demand, to basically take a look at workload and what our members felt was reasonable. The Correctional Service of Canada has always used the approach that they wanted to use their tools that they have developed internally. So the community parole officer resource formula in the community, and then in the institutions, they've actually been on the road to building their own institutional parole officer workload formula. Our biggest concern, as you may recall at the last convention, whether it was based on the lean method. And this is something that we have made very clear to the employer that we will not participate in any activities in building a tool built on the lean method. We currently have a report that's being generated with the assistance of Professor Soares in Montreal. And we hope to present that to the CSC later this year to demonstrate why we have so many concerns with the current tool that they have in place in the community. And now to answer your question more directly, do I think that this is going to be more effective? What this letter of agreement basically agrees to is that we are going to sit down to build a terms of reference to do an overall parole officer workload review. And why is that important? Because we must reach an agreement on those terms of reference. If we don't reach an agreement, it'll go absolutely nowhere. So hopefully this will motivate the Correctional Service of Canada to listen to us about our concerns about the lean method, about the approach that's being used. Again, the lean method breaks down the duties by task and then giving a certain time allotment. We're very concerned by that. All the reports that have been generated around parole officer workload have been clear that parole officers are overworked and that the tools aren't working. So what I really do believe is that although this is not enshrined in the collective agreement, it does demonstrate to Treasury Board that we're prepared to work with Correctional Service of Canada again to help build some tools that will be effective, but we are not going to go further than we are comfortable. And at the end of the day, if we have to bring this back to the next round of collective bargaining to try to get something different, that might just be the approach we'll have to take.
JR, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, thanks, Seb. I think David did mention many important points in that, but I do agree that this is, and since David had to sign this, it was a conversation I had with him that I think it's an important step we take towards the fact that we are, as a component, are willing to work towards it, because what the Treasury Board kept coming back and saying is that CSC was saying that, oh, we are always open, we're always talking at the table, which we all know is false. Also, what I think it does is it gives us time to better prepare and, you know, educate ourselves in stuff about workload, and stuff that came up was like, well, there's not been many complaints about it or whatever. So what I think we have to do, I've represented many parole officers and I have many friends across the country and that are on this call that are parole officers, and I understand the workload issues, and I pushed really hard and the team pushed really hard for this, but I think we have to do is start making more noise in the fact that educating ourselves and stuff like workloads or psychosocial factors and OSH complaints when it comes to that. And I believe that David will be working towards that and a team of parole officers in the near future.
Thank you very much, JR. David, a question here. Why is workload not recognized as a psychological hazard by the Treasury Board as per occupational health and safety within the PO group? So how do we record it to demonstrate the risk to mental health? It also aligns with lack of flexibility with telework. I think this kind of question goes line in line with the campaign that you made us develop on the presumptive injury.
Yeah, so the psychological factors is something that has been raised at the National Health and Safety Committee over the years. We're very concerned about the effect this has on the mental health of our members that are doing the work. Quite honestly, when we were building the job hazard analysis tools, we wanted that included as well. Workload is certainly a factor. And that was something that was introduced at a time that they were looking to move forward with the job hazard analysis tools. And they said, well, that's something we'll have to look at down in the future. Now, my understanding is that that has not occurred as of yet. I also think that they would be very hesitant to want to include that in there. Rebecca, maybe you could also add a little bit more about those particular job hazard analysis tools and how mental health being tied into that is problematic for the employer.
Oh, sure. Give me the complicated ones. Mental health, because it is by its very nature individualized in many ways, is difficult to assess in a job hazard analysis. There are certain things, of course, that are pretty universal, but how someone reacts to certain things is going to be based on a lot of individual factors that can't necessarily be controlled for in a job hazard analysis, which is why putting mental health factors in there is so tough. What we are working on is we're working with the mental health group with PSAC, the larger one with Treasury Board. We're working on presumptive injury. We're working on departmental policies to address these issues. But job hazard analysis is it's not the right tool for potentially identifying those sort of psychosocial risks for mental health.
Thank you. We don't have that many questions coming in, so just a reminder, people, you can still type in your questions in the Q&A section. David, we're going to switch to CMs, and for those who don't know CMs, it stands for civilian members of the RCMP. So David, what is the status of RCMP civilian members regarding the deeming? Are we part of PSAC for pay and RCMP for leave and benefits? Like, where do the civilian members of the RCMP fall into this whole process?
So the civilian members of the RCMP are a part of this round of collective bargaining. One of the reasons I think it's been so confusing is when the Section 58 decision was made quite some time ago, that actually brought them into our union, and the transition actually happened. I think a lot of the confusion was twofold. One, it's difficult to get the information out to the civilian members when we don't have their personal information, their personal emails, and getting that out. And unless they went to our website or the PSAC website, it's possible that they did not actually see any information out there. I know a number of years ago, we actually made a number of visits across the country to visit civilian members at various sites. The attendance wasn't very strong at that time, but again, I think the focus of the RCMP was really on deeming. The fact is that in terms of deeming itself, it's something that I have seen at the National Labor Management table where the RCMP, at least Commissioner Brenda Lucki, showed very little interest in moving forward with actual deeming. And I think what ended up happening is because of the Section 58 decision, putting the civilian members into the various bargain or into our, giving us the ability to help represent the civilian members assigned to us. The fact is that we have been able to provide representation for quite some time. And it's a matter of connecting with the civilian members and ensuring that they're aware of that. So in terms of the bargaining, though, I think the confusing piece to this was there's been no dues collected from the civilian members at all. And the PSAC previous policy and practice has been, we do not collect dues from any group coming into the PSAC until they have their first collective agreement. So that first collective agreement will be this one. If it is ratified, that's when the dues will begin. And at that point, they will know exactly how much their dues will be. Was there something else I'm missing in that question, Seb? I'm just wanting to make sure I answered it fully.
No, I think you did pretty good there. Another question here, David. You know, the strike mandate is valid for 60 days, correct? So the question here is, will the ratification votes be done before or after June 11, 2023? I heard that June 11, 2023 is the last day of PSAC's legal strike mandate.
I don't know if that January or that June 11th date is correct. I don't know if JR or Satinder are aware of that. I'll leave that to them to answer if they do. But I know that the idea was to ensure that the votes were completed prior to the middle of June. So that way, before things closed down for the summer, that signatures could be obtained if it was ratified. So I know that that is a particular trigger point. But the point is about the 60 days. It's correct that that strike vote is only good for 60 days. And I don't know if Rebecca, if you have anything to add about the 60-day timeframe.
My understanding, I will definitely confirm this, is that the strike vote is valid until June 20th, is what I was told, but we will confirm and let everyone know. If it happens that the final votes do occur after that date and it looks like we're going to go back out, well, yes, we will need another strike vote. It won't take months this time, though.
Thank you. Next question for Satinder and JR. Not sure if you'll have the answer, but we can give it a try. The question was written in French, so I'll read it in French so you get the full question here. Question pour équipe de négo. Y a-t-il une raison pourquoi les échelons de salaire pour les groupes CR ou AS n'ont pas été considérés dans les dernières négos? So I'm not sure if Satinder or JR, if you would have that information, but thought I would give it a try. If you would know why the CR or AS pay grids were not bargained during the last round, JR?
Yeah, that would fall on the PA table. I don't know if I understand the question exactly, because everyone's pay grids were negotiated, but I think what happened was there were demands early on about adding steps to scales, and those weren't set. Those weren't there at the end for priority. What was going on? It was about an overall PA agreement, and they were not adding steps specifically to ARNCs.
Thank you for that clarification, JR. I'm sure the member appreciates that. David, question for you about the hardship fund. So, you know, when some of our members were deemed essential, they have to, there's this 25% that they're supposed to pay back into the hardship fund. So is there any information you can share with regards to employees that were deemed to occupy an essential service position having to pay into a hardship fund?
So yes, under the PSAC Constitution, it does speak to the 25% to be collected from those who were not on the strike line. That is my understanding is that that has been in place, I believe, since the 60s. And it's something that at least in 2001 and 2004, I've heard that very little was collected during those strikes. Again, 2001 was 1 day, 2004 was a few days. So what the Constitution states is that the 25% is to be collected. It would go to the National Strike Fund, but then of course it would go back down to the local, to where the money has come from, and would be managed in such a manner that is explained in the information that is currently out there, which is quite rigorous. There's quite a bit of information that has to be provided to the PSAC. Again, it's not meant to supplement the strike pay. It's really meant to help meet some very basic needs when people are in a very difficult situation. So in terms of the 25%, again, it is something that has to be collected locally. It's identified in the Constitution, and it's something that cannot be enforced. It's not something that can actually can be demanded, but it is something that could be asked for.
Perfect, thank you. I had one question here, but I think Rebecca beat me to it. Yes. Will the $2,500 lump sum payment be taxed?
Of course. Everything is
Yeah.
taxed.
Lump sum payments attract the taxes of CPP, EI, and income tax.
See, I just had to say the word tax and Christina's camera came right on. I don't see any more questions. Just going to show you my screen very quickly here, just to give you a brief moment to type in more questions if you do have any. Just want to bring your attention on our website, usje.com. We do have the survey that David mentioned. Over 500 of our members already filled out the survey, available in English and French, on how we can better serve our members during a strike. Please take the time to complete it. Also, if you missed our newsletter, or you know a coworker who doesn't receive it or whatnot, we always post them as well on our website. Just under the newsletter section, you can access all of our past newsletters. And then if you want to print them and post them in your bulletin board, if you go work in the office, you can download a printable version. We did this as a request from one of our members. So going to take a last look if we have any more questions. Now we're getting some silliness here. So I think we're good, David. So David, I'll ask you to provide the closing remarks for the evening.
All right. Well, to close this evening, I want to end on a positive note. We've completed a lot of great work in the recent months. We held our very first Public Safety Award on Parliament Hill. Further, we continue to make good progress on USJE's presumptive injury campaign. We continue to work on our Albertans for RCMP campaign, protecting the jobs of our members there in the province of Alberta. And we continue to work on our food officer service campaign, and the list goes on. So I just want to let you know, we really appreciate that you've taken the time this evening to join us and for your interest in USJE. Please take the time and check out our USJE website, social media platforms, and reach out if you want to get involved or require any kind of assistance. Merci d'avoir participé ce soir et bonne soirée.